Good morning or good evening. I am HOSHI, Director of the Tokyo College. We will be conducting this webinar in Japanese. There are non-Japanese speakers in the audience, so first I will speak in English and then I'll come back to Japanese.
Good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. This is Takeo HOSHI, Director of the Tokyo College and the moderator for today's webinar. And unlike a usual Tokyo College webinar, today's webinar will be in Japanese, as all the panelists today are native Japanese speakers, and we will be talking about the Japanese economic policies for mostly Japanese audience. But the webinar comes with simultaneous translation, as usual. But this time, the translation will be from Japanese into English language. So if you want to listen to the English translation, please select English from the interpreter button in your webinar application. So that's how it goes today. So I'm now switching back to Japanese.
So that being the case, today our seminar is conducted in Japanese. As you know, Tokyo College was established in order to have a deep engagement with society, creating the new academic knowledge which will contribute to the realization of inclusive society. The slogan is shaping a shared future together. We have invited many renowned researchers from Japan and abroad. We have conducted webinars. A lot of activities were made. Part of such activities were possible thanks to your support. In these, so among the Tokyo University Foundation Fund, we have Tokyo College Support Fund. So we will be accepting your contribution. So if you agree with our activities, I hope that you will study possibility of contribution. The theme of today's webinar is economic policies under Japan's new cabinet, wish list and prospects. That's the title. Next week on Monday, there will be extraordinary session of the Diet. Prime Minister will be nominated. So I think you know who's going to be nominated, but it is not officially decided who's going to be the Prime Minister. So regarding the new economic policy, especially targeting on labor, we would like to discuss the new policy of the new cabinet. Japanese new cabinet is not officially decided, but American President-elect is already decided. We didn't anticipate this kind of a situation. But today, putting aside the topic of a U.S. President-elect of the United States, we will be mainly discussing Japanese economic policy. Today, we have 3 speakers and panelists. First is Professor Takatoshi Ito of Columbia University, who is in the Tokyo College studio. So we have Professor Ito with me in the studio, and he will appear very shortly. So about 2 months ago, together with Dr. Kiyotake, he appeared in Tokyo College. And earlier on, we delivered our communication on Japanese economy together with me. So he is one of the regulars of Tokyo College webinar. Thank you for coming. Second person is Dr. USUI Emiko, professor of Hitotsubashi University. Special field is labor economics. I think it is for her to be appearing for the first time at Tokyo College webinar. Thank you for coming. And the third speaker is Dr. Daiji Kawaguchi, professor, faculty of economics and dean, graduate school of public policy, University of Tokyo. His special field is also labor economics. I think Dr. Kawaguchi appeared in the past on the programs of Tokyo College webinar. I think he did. So thank you for coming today. So we go to the actual theme. First is to ask Professor Ito to very briefly introduce the discussion points regarding labor policy of new cabinet, which will be established the next week. He will be speaking for about 10 minutes. And then regarding his discussion points, Dr. Kawaguchi will be making comments. And then in the same vein of style, Professor Usui will be making comments. And then we will have the general discussion. That will be the format. Dr. Kawaguchi, Dr. Usui, I hope that you'll be speaking each for about 10 minutes. Dear audience, you can use a Q&A button on webinar. So please use the Q&A function. You can send in your question anytime. So we'd like to incorporate your questions to the extent possible in the course of our discussion. Now, Professor Ito, please, floor is yours. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning or good evening for the audience participating from the United States. Today, as Dr. Hoshi mentioned, we will be talking about economic policies under Japan's new cabinet. That will be the main point of economic policies. I'd like to share slides with you. When we started this plan, as Dr. Hoshi mentioned, the new cabinet was going to be decided and what's going to happen to the US presidential election. We had no knowledge about how the cabinet would be decided and so forth. But in the case of Japan, LDP presidential election was held and general election was held. And then new cabinet would be formed the next week. So the presidential election of LDP and in the course of general election, various economic policies were discussed. We anticipated the discussion. So we economists could sort of delve into the new economic policy. That was the beginning of this plan, and we began with the plan of this program. So there are several economic policy points regarding labor regulations or regarding women labor participation. There are certain hurdles. So within LDP or in the course of general election between opposition party and ruling party, discussion was held. So maybe we could discuss those points as well. There were 5 points that I discerned in the course of discussion. The first one is minimum wage. Minimum wage in Japan is average 1,055 yen. So that is the prospect. But this is the national average. Highest one is in Tokyo, 1,163 yen. And there are prefectures having a lower minimum wage. Why are they so low? Is it low compared with international levels? And why are the wages so low? So these are the points that we'd like to discuss. Incidentally, in New York, where Columbia University is located, the minimum wage is $16, and it's about 2,400 yen. So compared with the Japanese minimum wage or compared with other advanced countries' levels, the Japanese minimum wage is absolutely low. During the election, Prime Minister Ishiba proposed to make it 1,500 yen by the end of 2020s. That was the campaign pledge that he made during the course of general election. Keizai Doyukai proposed to make it 1,500 yen within 3 years. So regarding these points, how do labor economists and macroeconomists think of raising the minimum wage in Japan? This is the first discussion point that I wanted you all to discuss. On the other hand, there is the labor shortage. So we talk about the labor shortage and minimum wage is very slow to rise. What are the reasons? Now then, what are the determinants of wages? The supply and demand will determine. That is what the textbook says. But in the case of wage would be decided for part-timers in an ad hoc way, and that is determined by supply and demand. But for regular employees or for the SME employees, It's not decided ad hoc. So regular wages or irregular wages, part-timers wages, there are different levels of wages. So in this situation, for the last 30 years, how they were determined? How come that wages did not move so much? So I'd like to ask this question to the labor economists, especially since 2013, in the course of Abenomics, the corporate profits, stock prices, and retained earnings increased so much. In the last couple of years, historic high corporate profits were registered. Stock prices also went up. How come the labor did not receive distribution of such profits and high stock prices? How come the minimum wage is hovering at a very low level? So shortage of labor, we talk about it, but the real wage increases have been negative for so long, despite a labor shortage. There are some statistical problems, but real wage, according to the statistics thereof, the minus is continuing, negative is continuing. So against the shortage of labor, how come the real wage increases has been in the negative domain? So this is another question. So in discussing these matters from the corporate side, people will say that the labor productivity is not up. And if labor productivity increases, then we can increase the minimum wage, corporations would say. But profits are rising, and actually the profit should be redistributed to the laborers, but they don't do that. And they always speak of labor productivity. Why labor productivity does not increase? So I'd like you to present your knowledge and your findings about your academic research. In this relationship, there is another discussion point, especially in the course of presidential election of LDP. It was much debated, and that is the change in dismissal rule. The dismissal rule is hampering the labor mobility, LDP said. So if this is lifted, the labor mobility will be enhanced, and the workers will be able to go where they can really exhibit their value of labor. And then wages can go up. That was the main thrust of the discussion. Is it true, as they say? Or is there something wrong about their logic? I would like you to discuss this matter of change in dismissal rule. Of course, there is an opposition opinion. The dismissal rule should be liberalized. There are people saying that. So we would like to have all-inclusive discussions. In the society in the last 20 to 30 years, labor mobility was increasing. The lifetime employment system has been sort of relaxed. There are many people saying that we should do away with the lifetime employment. Is it good? Do you think that workers should be able to maximize their labor value as they move in the labor market? So I would like you to discuss the pros and cons of that. There is another important element, which is the female workers' future. In 2013, since 2013, the female and elderly labor participation rates have increased. Rates have increased. There are more women working, especially child rearing generation 25 to 40. Before 2012, it was once goes down, and then after that it goes up. So-called M-curve shape was the demographic characteristics. But in 10 years, it has disappeared. So in terms of female workers' participation rate, there was a leapfrog progress. We can say that. However, wage gap still remains. And going forward, rather than increasing the number of female workers, we must improve the quality of a women labor force. How is it going to be done? And continuing one's career is very important. And then the birth rate is coming down. We must prevent the further going down of a birth rate. So how do we have the opinions of the female workers, expert academicians on this point? And the last point, this is related with the women workforce. This is the question on walls of 1.03 million and 1.3 million. 1.03 million, it has this is the ceiling where you cannot receive any dependent allowance. And 1.3 million, if you go beyond that, you will have to pay for your social security. In other words, you don't have the benefit of dependence, a spouse's deduction. So dependent qualification is going to be changed if it is raised to 1.3 million, and part-timers can increase their working hours if these walls are there. So they are the hurdles and walls. How can we remove such walls? I would like you to talk about those ideas. Especially recently, much discussed in media is the National Democrats' demand. So they are demanding 1.03 million should be raised to 1.78 million yen. And this could enlarge the discussion in this regard. I would like you to discuss what we can do about it. So if you have any proposals or ideas, we would like to hear your ideas. So these are the 5 points that I wish to present as the discussion points. I would hope to have a very active discussion in this regard. Thank you very much, Professor Ito. Now then, we'd like to go to the 2 commentators. First is to Dr. Kawaguchi, Dean of Graduate School of Public Policy. Thank you very much for inviting me. I will be using some PowerPoints, and I'd like to discuss these matters. The first point. This is the concern about the minimum wage hike. What is important is that if minimum wage goes up, the low-income earners can raise their wages, which is desirable, of course. On the other hand, there will be people losing jobs. So to the jobs, there could be negative impact, so we should have consideration about that. In the Japanese positivistic research area, minimum wage goes up and then jobs could decrease. There are some academic reports talking about the possible decrease of jobs. So in Japan, the jobs could be reduced. So in fact, low educated people, like the minimum wage hike reduces the employment of less educated men. And sometimes this problem is regarded as NEET-related problems. So low-educated men, they will lose job opportunities.
That is a tendency you see. In such a situation, if we raise a minimum wage, and then this problem may get even more deteriorated, more severe. The biggest problem is the policy decision. In that process, the assessment of the policy impact on employment has to be done. However, that kind of mechanism is not available now. And in the council meetings, minimum wage hike is being discussed, and the impact of the hike is discussed. However, explicitly, there is no requirement to assess the impact on the employment. If we look at the Minimum Wage Act, the employment and also livelihood and the company's capacity to pay wages have to be considered in the process. So these things are only things to be considered. Therefore, impact on the employment is not required in the assessment process. So such an act has to be revised. Now, after the revision of that law and the impact of the policy on the employment has to be made as obligatory by the government. And then after that, EBPM, evidence-based policy making, has to be introduced in the wage area as well. Why is it that labor shortage situation does not contributing to wage increase? And there is a book published in 2017, and Usui sensei was involved in this as well. And in this book, Kawaguchi Hara thesis is provided. And then why wages do not increase despite labor shortage? To this question, women and labor supply is elastic. So if the wage increases slightly, then those who want to work more come into the labor market. That is the elasticity. However, the wages didn't increase despite labor shortage, and this argument was provided 7 years ago. Now, the women and elderly active employment. So women and older people who are not working now, if these people are depleted, then wage is expected to increase. That was our assumption. However, if we look at the numbers after 2015, the blue line that shows population above 15 years of age. As you know, Japanese population is declining, and particularly the 15 to 64, that is a productive age population. This segment is declining even faster. On the other hand, the jobless people and working people, that is a labor force rate, and actually it is increasing recently. That is because older people are working more compared to the past, and also women are working more. So labor participation in these two segments have increased. However, the labor participation of women is still increasing even today. So in that sense, labor supply elasticity has not been changed since 7 years ago. So even if labor demand increases, wage is not increasing. So that is what's happening in the market. So if we consider that, the current situation is not pathetic. It is happening. It's explainable within the standard economics model. Therefore, if the demand increases as is now in the future, and if we wait for the depletion of labor supply, and so we have to wait and see in that sense. The third point, that is a monetary compensation scheme. The dismissal regulation relaxation is promoted by Koizumi Shinjiro during the LDP presidential election campaign. And because of that, this dismissal regulation was put on the agenda as a controversial issue, and that was criticized. Maybe much attention was not paid to this. And I think Mr. Kono is talking about dismissal regulation as well. However, his proposal is to introduce monetary compensation scheme, and the relaxation of dismissal regulation is basically very challenging because there is a lot of precedents, and we can see for what reasons the business owners are firing their employees, and they are incorporated into the current labor standard rule. Therefore, it is very difficult to change that provision because of the historic experience. And therefore, employees have no choice to accept the transfer requirement and also a longer labor time. And that particularly for full-time workers, Therefore, for these people, it is not very appropriate. So the relaxation dismissal rule is very difficult and not desirable. However, on the other hand, what's necessary is transparency. Sometimes dismissal is unfair and it is rendered as a court decision, then the decision to fire an employee will be invalidated. Therefore, workers can be saved, relieved. However, in Japan, usually the reinstatement to the previous work is the avenue provided as a remedy. That is the only remedy or choice provided in Japan. So after the court decision is made and workers do not want to go back to the previous company. Therefore, in reality, usually monetary compensation is provided. However, monetary compensation is not explicitly provided under the law. Therefore, we don't know market price of monetary compensation for such a dismissal. Among advanced countries, only Japan does not have a monetary compensation scheme yet. So in such a situation, what's necessary for Japan is to introduce monetary compensation scheme. And when the dismissal is invalidated by the court, then we should have a formula such as several months worth compensation has to be paid as a monetary compensation. And such a scheme is necessary so that we can have a transparency of dismissal system. Now, if that happens, particularly for big companies, as a result of longer service years, the wages increase. Therefore, if these people get a new job, they will suffer from a significant decrease of wage. And this can be compensated for with monetary compensation. The Professor Kawata of the Tokyo University and I made this proposal. However, for big companies, for those who have worked long years, they would have a very high number as a monetary compensation. So it's quite difficult. However, restructuring with the dismissal. So if the firm chooses to dismissal as a way to restructuring, then these companies have to have a clear plan for the future. And then these companies will be able to raise funds for such a restructuring and dismissal in the future. So I think such a restructuring efforts should be made. This is my view. Thank you very much. These 3 points I wanted to make. Kawaguchi-sensei, thank you very much. Now, next, I would like to invite Professor Usui. Thank you. From my part, I would like to make a comment. I was going to talk about women issue first. However, listening to Professor Kawaguchi, minimum wage and also dismissal regulation, from the different perspective, I would like to make a comment on these points. Regarding the minimum wage hike, minimum wage, if we are to increase that to 1,500, then increase of labor cost. Because of that, SMEs who are hiring employees at the minimum wage level will not be able to survive in the market unless they increase productivity. In order to compensate for labor, perhaps CapEx will be actively made. For example, recently, ICT technology can be leveraged in order to increase efficiency, and labor-saving investment is expected. In this process, these skill levels required by SMEs may change. For example, the labor-saving system can be operated not by low-skilled laborers, but middle-skilled laborers. In that case, low-skilled laborers will lose their jobs, and middle-skilled laborers, as a result, will benefit from 1,500 minimum wage hike level. Therefore, if there is a loss of employment and there is an increase of wage, in order to respond that, the policy intervention is necessary to promote reskilling promotion, for example. Regarding the third point, that is the relaxation of dismissal regulation. From the worker's perspective, I want to make a comment. If it is relaxed, then companies will be able to fire low productivity laborers more easily. And as a result, the remaining laborers and productivity and wages will increase. And as a result, labor and job mismatch will be reduced, and there will be right persons in right positions, and the productivity of the company as a whole will increase. However, on the other hand, the laborers will be using jobs and involuntarily be laid off, and they will not be able to find new jobs in some cases, and therefore they have no choice but to accept even lower skilled jobs. Even if a government provides a reskilling program to these workers, perhaps the impact is limited depending on workers. Therefore, I think experts like us have to study even further on this point. Those who sometimes cannot find appropriate jobs after dismissal. And if there is a dismissal risk is higher, then the workers' the employment status is unstable and they cannot have a good plan for the future. That would impact negatively their family planning and livelihood as well. From this point of view, in order to reduce mismatch, maybe alternative measures other than dismissal rules have to be considered. For example, seniority wage system can be revised, and also we can give subsidies to companies that provide training to employees with skill mismatch, but through government. And as a result, companies can train internally workers and the continue employment, so that more sustainable policy needs to be pursued. The fourth is about the future of women's workforce. Recently, the elderly and women's labor participation is increasing significantly, particularly productive population is declining. However, the older people and women are participating in the labor and compensating for the decline in productive population. And in Japan, population peaked out in 2007, and the population started to gradually decline. As of 2024, population came down to 124 million people. In this way, when productive population declines, the women and elderly are participating more actively in labor. However, in using women's labor force, there are important things to consider. In the past, women are not working because they were responsible for family caring and child rearing. Therefore, these women coming to labor market, that means that such a family care related work has to be done by their spouses or parents or a local community or nursing nurseries and municipalities. And then working mothers, in order for them to continue career development, child care leave played a important role. And there are more full-time female workers who took childcare leave for the first baby continue to work. For example, from 2015 to 2019, about 70% of full-time women workers continue to work even after giving birth to a first child, taking advantage of childcare leave.
However, as Professor Ito questioned, what about the quality? Even if a woman can continue working, the track is called mummy track, and promotional opportunity is limited. And if the child care leave period is long, it will hamper the career promotion of women. This is pointed out by the Western researchers. Because women occupy the main roles of child rearing. So going forward, fathers' participation and fathers' positive engagement to child rearing is necessary. Another point, mothers' chore must be relieved. And in order to support the job continuation, babysitter subsidy as well as the upgrading of a child care center would be promoted as a policy means. Well, there are women who are hoping for breastfeeding. There are less women wanting to have breastfeeding. So there are certain connection points between mothers and children. That is what I hear from the medical institution people. So we must alleviate the child rearing burden of mothers, and we must promote the participation of fathers. We must upgrade the child care centers. So not only that, children's well-being must be enhanced. So society at large must be able to recognize the importance of well-being of child. I think that will lead into the stopping the further decline of birth rate. Inputting a lot of time by parents to child rearing, it means a reduced time for work, and it will impact negatively on employment. If you have a plural number of children, the child rearing period will be longer. So there are some jobs which have the direct connection between the productivity enhancement and the child rearing experience, but there are cases not necessarily so. Earlier on, women took the main charge, but recently the men are positively getting involved in child rearing. So children are the human talent supporting the future society. So we must have the viewpoint of child rearing contributing to the society at large. I think the understanding and assessment is not enough. Last point is 1.03 million or 1.3 million yen walls. Question. Income tax, taxable threshold would be enhanced from 1.03 million to 1.73 million yen. Well, if you think simplistically, if wage is standard, the labor supply will increase. That is what we can anticipate. But next wall awaits you. That is the 1.3 million yen wall. What is 1.3 million yen wall? The social security, you will be removed from the dependency of your parents or spouses in terms of social security. You have to accede to the social national pension plan and national health scheme. So this is the threshold is 1.3 million yen. You are derailed from the spouse's dependency, and then you become the category 3 insured of national pension plan, and then you will have to pay for the pension premium, and about 200,000 yen will be the reduction of take-home pay. As a result, the threshold, even if it increased from 1.03 to 1.73, because of the wall of 1.3 million yen, the part-time worker, women workers' income will only increase from 1.03 to 1.3. So if you eliminate the wall of 1.03 million yen, and then you can enhance from 1.03 to 1.78, then you will have to consider how it is going to be revised. The Treasury Ministry is saying that the tax revenue will decrease by 7 trillion yen. So I think this is something that we must pursue our study. On the other hand, there are about 7 million category 3 insured. So if they are demanded to pay new social premium, then some tax increase could be anticipated. However, it is not enough to replace or refill 7 trillion yen loss. So this whole question is very important. So actually, what is going to happen? We have to verify utilizing a good amount of data. That is what is demanded going forward. That is my comment on 4 points. Thank you very much, Professor Usui. We will go to the discussion. But before that, I would like to sort out and juxtapose the discussion points. There were 5 discussion points presented by Professor Ito. What about minimum wage? What are the determinants of wages in Japan? It is there is a labor shortage, and how wage is not rising. It is something wrong, something strange. The third point was a change in dismissal rule. Is it good or bad? The fourth point was a female workers' future. How much is going to be advanced, and how is it going to impact the economy in the future? And what should we do going forward? Not only the quantity, but the quality question must be visited. In order to entice a quality female workers, what should we do? The last one is the walls of 1.03 million and 1.3 million. So respective of these points, both discussants respectively, and both of them responded to those questions. Regarding minimum wages, Kawaguchi-sensei and Usui-sensei are saying that we should be very careful about considering the negative impact to the jobs. Determinants of wages, Kawaguchi-sensei made a comment to the effect that women and elderly workers' elasticity of labor supply was at work. So there was nothing wrong, nothing strange about this wage not rising despite the labor shortage. The third point, Kawaguchi-sensei and Usui-sensei, both of them made comments. Kawaguchi-sensei said that the dismissal rule is not about lifting or relaxing. The unfair dismissal is happening, and that should be eliminated. So as one of the solutions, monetary compensation is something that we can think of. Usui-sensei said that the dismissal rule relaxation would be problematical, and it will introduce instability to the jobs and so forth. Fourth point, the female workers' future. Professor Usui's point was simply put, the child rearing leave and had a certain role, but positively, but the men should get more involved in taking further the leaves, babysitters, a subsidy or some, and the child care center must be upgraded and reorganized and so forth. There will be many points to be discussed there. Walls over 1.03 or 1.3 million, there are many points that we should be considering in going forward. Economists must have solid research about that. So I think that was the general comment that we heard. So Professor Ito, can you sort of respond to those comments? Please take the floor. Regarding the minimum wage, it could impact negatively the jobs. Usui-sensei said, minimum wage is there, and that could bring about the standard setting. So including that possibility, the jobs could reduce, but the services is not deteriorating. That is the direction that we may shift. Then minimum wage raising is not a problematical thing. And because of that, the labor saving is not something that the people can cope all the time. So less educated men would be the target of this problem. So reskilling should be provided. Reskilling could produce in certain results. So we must shift our viewpoint to different dimensions, different levels. The supply of women and elderly workers, I think we have come to almost the limit. So going forward, the women and the elderly labor supply would not be suppressing the wages going forward, because the supply has almost come to the limit. I hope that can be the discussion point. Kawaguchi-sensei talked about the third point. The dismissal case must be resolved. The problem must be resolved first of all. including the legal aspects. Kawaguchi-sensei gave a lot of suggestions. Now then, monetary compensation could be one avenue. Then calculation method, what level would be appropriate? Kawaguchi-sensei suggested a certain level. For example, retirement payment, the advance payment of the retirement severance pay. So there is a allowance given in the corporate account. So it's a natural payment that a corporation should be making for the severance pay. Kawaguchi-sensei, Usui-sensei, both of them talked about the in-house reskilling could be provided. That could be a better. But I don't know. When it comes to Japanese companies, Japanese corporate governance gets related. Japanese companies were made big conglomerate, had different industries. So the job categories were not secured. So in-house reskilling that is suggested and labor shifting to the reskilled within the company. That was what has been done until now. But this is not good for stock prices. So the labor shifting should be more focused and more it should be done in a focused manner. Now then, internal labor market will become smaller and smaller within one corporation. And then it will go out to the society, and then you will find the good appropriate jobs. You have to do that. Workers will have to do that. That's my understanding. So from the viewpoint of corporate governance, labor mobility has to go from inside the company to outside the company. I think that is the viewpoint that must be added. The fourth point, female workers' future. Many points were presented by Usui-sensei, and I wholeheartedly agree with her. Babysitter subsidies, daycare centers, and mother-child time togetherness must be increased, and so forth. There are different factors which have to be taken into consideration. What can we do about it? We don't have a solid package of these different factors. So at least amongst the economists, we have not come to the point where we may arrive at the consensus to our regret. I think package must be worked out so that at least economists have some idea. So 1.03 is increased to 1.78, but maybe the entire process will be stopped at 1.3 million for many people. So major mechanism is needed.
So the family quotient rule and other discussions are taking place. So at the household level, one person is working and earning more than 10 million yen, and the dual income earners as a family together they are earning 10 million yen. So how are we going to treat these different types of families? And currently, if one person is working and the dependent is eligible for deduction, that is a 1.03 million yen threshold wall. However, in the case of dual income earners, they have to pay contributions on their own, 2 persons. Therefore, this is actually being discussed, and therefore not only income but also social insurance, social security contribution has to come into play in the discussion. And also, if there are children, and they have to be considered in the family quotient rule discussion. Thank you very much. So going forward, Kawaguchi-sensei and Usui-sensei maybe refute to the Professor Ito, but from audience members listening to the webinar, we have been receiving very good questions. Therefore, including these discussions, we would like to conduct a discussion. Now, first of all, minimum wage, how is it determined? There is a question, that is to say, what determines the minimum wage level? I think everybody understood this. However, there are some people who do not know. Therefore, Kawaguchi sensei, could you explain how it is determined? My understanding is that minimum wage level differs from one prefecture to another. However, central government actually has a control over different prefectures for the determining minimum wage level. So perhaps that is a rough explanation. But Kawaguchi sensei, could you explain how the minimum wage is determined in Japan? Can I respond now? Yes. How it is determined in Japan, minimum wage level, legally speaking, at the end of the day, it is a Minister of Welfare, Labor, Health, and bureau chief in charge determines. And there is a minimum wage level central council in the government. As Mr. HOSHI said, the country is divided into 4 blocks. In each of these blocks, appropriate level of minimum wage level is determined as a metric, as a yardstick. And based on that, there are 47 prefectures which have a regional minimum wage council, and those councils at the prefectural level determines appropriate minimum wage level. The proposal is made by these councils. And then the regional labor chief makes that determination decisions. However, in reality, until 2015 or so, the MHLW conducts a survey regarding the minimum wage increase for small companies, and then the yardstick is provided based on that, and Central Council made a recommendation for the increase of minimum wage. And in a sense, it is based on evidence to some extent, and that is up to 2015. But after that, as a government policy, particularly in the broad brush policy framework, the minimum wage hike has to be done. And as a result, a political decision, central yardstick is provided based on this outlook. And what was new this year, Central Council requested 47 prefectures to raise the level by 50 yen. However, Tokushima Prefecture added 135 yen, and therefore 85 yen was raised. So this is possible, actually. However, in the past, such a thing has not been done. However, legally speaking, this can be done, and somebody can do that. And this year, Tokushima Prefecture did that. Therefore, the minimum wage can be raised freely by prefecture. Now, MHLW minister and also Labor Bureau chief has to make a decision, and that is the legal framework. However, the administrator does not have legal authority at the end of the day. Thank you. One point of clarification, the regional labor bureaus, how did you say? MHLW's outposts, right? That's right. And basically, central government is making a decision at the end of the day. Did you say Ehime Prefecture? No, Tokushima Prefecture. So a regional labor bureau can raise more than what is recommended by the Central Council, right? Yes. There is a regional minimum wage council, and 84 yen was the recommendation made. And then the labor bureau chief in that prefecture accepted that proposal from the regional council. So that is how the minimum wage level is determined in Japan. Now, so the government policy can make an influence over the level of minimum wage. And there is another question from the audience. That is a 1.03 or 1.3 million yen walls, so to speak. 1.03 million yen wall, let me read it out. isn't there any idea to abolish this wall at all, to raise the wall, or how much should it be? That kind of policy discussion, rather than at the end of the day, from even one end of income, step by step, social insurance contribution should be made, and also income tax should be paid. Therefore, those who are below 1.03 yen threshold, they will be have to pay a social insurance contributions. However, they would have a more take-home pay. So, if I may add my own question, the 1.03 and 1.3 million walls, in order to overcome these walls, another approach is that if income increases and they exceed these walls, and if there are more people like this, and then naturally this problem is resolved. For example, 1.03 yen wall, when you reach that level, how much burden will be increased? That's 20,000 yen or so, according to a survey or estimate. And if that's the case, it is just about, if you can get a 1.05 million yen or more income, then you can easily overcome this wall of 1.03. Therefore, problem naturally resolves. Then, if the wall is increased according to policy proposal, then in that case, this is only procrastinating the resolution of this issue. Therefore, in the future, people may reach this higher wall, and then they have to try to overcome this wall. What is your response? Perhaps Usui Sensei. Thank you for the question for the floor. So right from the 1 yen, first yen, the income tax can be levied. If that's the case, those who are entering into labor market, the real hourly wage decreases. EITC, Earned Income Tax Credit System in the United States. In Japan, how do you call it? In this way, the benefit can be provided for a tax reduction. So then people would be incentivized to enter the labor market because they could get a higher take-home pay. Therefore, low-income earners are motivated to go into labor market according to U.S. Practice. Therefore, maybe we are moving to that direction. So Hoshi Sensei's question is saying that if real wage increases, then we don't have to worry about the walls because workers will be getting higher income. Then they don't have to worry about these thresholds rules. I think this is only natural, not surprising. And therefore, a minimum wage hike and also the wages increases, naturally such an issue of wars will disappear. At the same time, those who want to work more, they are not happy at the 1.03 million yen. According to the media reports, they are willing to work more and longer. Therefore, they do not think that 1.03 is an appropriate wage level. They want to work more. So we have to be aware of the fact that there are people who want to work more. Thank you. Ito Sensei or Kawaguchi Sensei, could you add something? Ito Sensei, please. 1.03, that is a real wall, or 1.3 million yen, that is the real wall. I think the answer differs from one person to another. If you are single and working on a part-time and they are not dependent, then 1.03 is a real wall for them. However, so-called salaried person, a spouse, wife, particularly the higher income earners spouse. In that case, perhaps rather than 1.03, 1.3 million is the bigger wall. So highly competent people, as a result, have to leave labor market because of child rearing and go back to labor market. However, 1.3 is a wall. At least this wall should be raised to 1.5 million because these people coming back to the labor market cannot gain enough to compensate for social insurance premium. Therefore, of course, there's a procedural issue, but they should not be motivated to go back to labor market if they have to pay social contribution. Therefore, 1.03 and 1.3, these have to be considered as a package to overcome both of these. And the Usui sensei mentioned that the labor income has to be treated more preferably, and the tax deduction with benefits is one approach. I think this is a very useful tool, instrument. And another point, Tokushima Prefecture's example was given. According to the news online, minimum wage, Tokushima was the lowest minimum wage prefecture. That is why Tokushima decided to raise more so that they are second from the bottom. The bottom prefecture, that is Akita prefecture, that is the worst minimum wage prefecture. Therefore, that's a positive competition among prefectures. Thank you. 1.03 million won. As Professor Ito mentioned, as a result of childbirth, the women leaves labor market. There are some people like that now and coming back to labor market. They usually come back to labor market on a part-time basis, and they face 1.03 million walls. And therefore, that is a problem for women for career development. Then what can be done? From the audience, we have a very good opinion. I am in favor of that. Basically, we should shrink this system. That is the direction we should move into. Therefore, 1.78 million yen proposed. Therefore, this threshold being raised, that kind of idea is problematic in many ways. In the beginning, Usui sensei pointed out that this will make a big hole in the tax revenue, and about 8 trillion yen of tax revenue reduction is expected, and therefore with 1% increase of consumption tax, it's only 2 trillion yen contribution. Therefore, that means that more than 5% increase is necessary. And Japan struggled when it increased the consumption tax from 5 to 10%. Therefore, political capacity to raise the consumption tax from 10 to 15 is very, very challenging. And the politicians have to make explanation for this, particularly DPP, Democratic Party for People. So in that sense, I think that favorable direction is to shrink this system. That means that the tax increase is expected. Therefore, poor families, when the household income is low, then a burden will increase. Therefore, as Usui sensei said, the tax reduction with benefits provision has to be considered as an approach.
So we have to think of a bigger package. As was mentioned, economists must go deeper into the research. I agree with that. At the same time, relevant ministries, including the treasuries, they've got the capacity to do so. So I hope that they will run simulation to this end to deepen the thought. Thank you very much. 1.03 or raising it to 1.78. I think it was rather rare, but we formed a consensus amongst ourselves. It's not right to raise it immediately to 1.78. We agreed on that. Now, next question from the audience. This is again the minimum wage. Looking into the foreign studies, positivistic studies, even if you raise the minimum wage, jobs do not decrease, and jobs do not, and that does not affect the labor market. So what about Japan? In the US, minimum wage is going to be raised. We didn't have time to look into the American situation, but in the past, Japanese situation was that unemployment rate may have been impacted by the raising of the minimum wage. Kawaguchi sensei referred to a research. That is, the minimum wage is raised, then low skill young workers, men, unskilled men's jobs may be lost. But overall, unemployment rate, is it going to be raised with the raise of minimum wage? Kawaguchi sensei, I think all questions go to you. Thank you very much. First of all, I think there is in Western countries the consensus that the labor market doesn't suffer even if the jobs does not decrease, even if minimum wage is increased. So in a systematic way, the impact of minimum wage was researched. Then there are some reports saying that jobs do decrease. So jobs increase or decrease. I don't think it is correct to say that the global consensus is that the jobs do not decrease. There is a certain reasons. So it is dependent upon the size of the labor market. So what they find in foreign countries would not directly transplant it to the Japanese situation. Even in Japanese studies, minimum wage is impacting certain people, but very small number of people. And they are impacting in a concentrated way to this very few number of people. So looking into the total picture, it's very difficult to discern the impact. So low-skilled men's jobs are lost. Some people would argue, but these people should go into the reskilling and their skills should be improved. I think this viewpoint is very important. Japanese policy for the time being, for example, free tuition for senior high schools, trying to reduce the number of dropouts from senior high schools. So that is impacting jobs to a certain extent. We must see to it. Also, those people who do not go to universities, is it better to provide a vocational training to these people or not? We should be able to respond by research, but the research is not progressing to that extent. So we must deepen our research. Also, regarding minimum wage, from the structure of that, SME's management must be protected. Well, if you do that, so METI is doing of a different level of numbers and metrics on the occasion of a minimum wage increase. So labor cost could be sort of saved. So there are certain merits about that. And then productivity gain could be experienced. But there are people left behind, low-educated, low-skilled men, young men. So how to go about these people, that is the most relevant point, I believe. Professor Ito, do you have anything to say? In order to protect jobs, minimum wage shouldn't be raised or don't have to be raised or don't want to be raised. But maybe for the higher skilled people may be impacted by the minimum wage hike. So regular high-skilled workers, their wages may be dragged down to by the lower skilled people. And that was what happened in the last 30 years. And there is accumulation in the last 30 years. And Japanese wages are too low. I think that's the current situation. So it is not only the matter of a minimum wage. That is only my impression, but it's not a matter of a minimum wage alone. What you said, Professor Ito, is what other academicians are saying. Because of the minimum wage low minimum wage, the low productivity people still have some jobs to retain. So by raising the minimum stage, it's a shock therapy in a way, and low productivity jobs would be changed and shifted to higher productivity jobs. I really wondered whether this was true, but 2015, there was an introduction of minimum wage in Germany, and there was a research, and that happened. This scholar's point actually was realized. The minimum wage was low to begin with in the eastern part, but with the introduction of higher minimum wage, there were many people who were working at a low wage, but there were people shifting from low-paid workplaces to highly paid workplaces. So there is a possibility. I'm not negating the possibility at all. And in Japan, the minimum wage is increasing little by little in Japan. So I think watching what is going on, policy management should be operated. Well, we are scheduled to have our meeting until 9:15, and time flies. The last question, this is going to be the last question. This is again a question from the audience. This is the politics-related question. Of course, the tax deduction is preferable, but Komeito Party is asserting this. There are many sense of resistance among politicians, like the lack of data and so forth. In this situation, to the management, what kind of communication is preferable and desirable? What is the opinion of the economists? Would anybody venture to respond? Professor Ito? No, Kawaguchi-sensei should go first. Well, Kawaguchi-sensei, you are designated, you are nominated. With benefit, the model year happens 1 year afterwards. EITC discussed the same thing in the United States. As a matter of fact, the more you work, you will benefit. That is the mechanism, that is the system. But the timing of coming back is late. That's why the tax increase portion is recognized by the people. I think it is possible because of the lateness of the timing. So the politicians, they have concerns. Where do they come from? Economists are aware of those problems. I think that should be communicated. Politicians are feeling certain ways. And as a matter of communication tool, we shouldn't neglect that. We should share in the concerns that they have, and then we should identify where those concerns and worries come from in the case of politicians. And then we can think together how we can go about and overcome this problem. Ito-sensei, anything to add? Related matter, I suppose. Consumption tax from 5% to 8% to 10%. Eventually, when we did that, it is reverse progressive, people said, because the food items and so forth will have to be spent. And then from income, you have to pay the consumption tax. and they have the greater proportion of food expense. And that's why the increasing consumption tax was reverse progressive. And then there was an idea of relief mechanism on consumption tax. For example, the annual amount of the tax increase would be calculated, and then that could be put into the relaxed consumption tax rate. I thought that the benefit payment would be better than that, but there was a rebuttal, and that's why the alleviated tax rate was employed. So, after all, communication is very important. Tokushima Prefecture was discussed. Did it increase? The jobs in Tokushima reduced, or from outside prefectures, workers can come in? So that can be the practical experience that we can test, economists can test in Tokushima Prefecture. Thank you very much. We have come to the last time, so we were not able to cover everything about the consumption tax increase. The active discussion was very animated. Audience asked many questions. Sorry, we were not able to respond to all the questions, but I think overall we had a very good discussion. So today's webinar of Tokyo College will come to a close. Professor Ito, Professor Kawaguchi, Professor Usui, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you. Thank you all.